Hello, I'm Sean Mullally, and welcome to Muskegon in Motion, where we take a close look at some of the interesting things happening in and around Muskegon County. My guest today is someone I've known my entire life, my father, Richard Mullally, and for a few years now he has been working on something called the Muskegon County World War II Veterans Project. So I'll let you give the background. What exactly is the Muskegon County World War II Veterans Project?
It's something that has not happened anywhere else. Muskegon County is the only county where this is occurring. I decided a couple of years ago that the men and women who served our country in World War II deserve to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
When the Civil War and the Spanish-American War and the World War I happened, we let those people quietly fade away and be forgotten. But I decided that World War II was such an important event, probably the most important event in the history of the world, that I thought these people should be remembered, and a good way I found to remember them is to make sure that they are in the museums. 90% of the veterans are already deceased.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't make any difference for this project because the people are remembered with a photograph of themselves taken when they were young in the military, and information is printed at the bottom. That picture then is donated to all three of the museums in Muskegon, and in the future generations, in fact, even now, people can have access to seeing who these people were, and they'll be able to see their relatives.
Now, what are the three museums that are participating?
What used to be called the Muskegon County Museum is now the Lakeshore Museum Center.
Okay.
The Silversides Museum by the Muskegon Channel, and also the LST 393 Veterans Museum downtown. Two of these are military museums, and one, of course, is the General Museum for Muskegon County.
Now, you've chosen to specifically focus on World War II era veterans, and you give me some of the reason why, and I think that that's very timely, because if it's not done now, then when is it going to be done for these veterans? And that's maybe you're thinking on that?
Exactly. It was almost 20 years ago I wanted to find some World War I veterans who were living. It took 4 years and plenty of leads and following up false leads, and I found 5 in West Michigan, not in Muskegon County. There was only one in Muskegon County. There were 5, and they were between 100 and 102 years old. I visited each one of them in their homes, and they all could remember what it was like over in France. I took pictures of them, but I realized it's too late for them. But there are so many people from World War II still alive and active in Muskegon County. I figured now's the time, because if I wait a few more years on this, it too will be hopeless.
How many have you contacted so far, do you think?
Counting all of the veterans, the living and the deceased, it's around 1,400. I have personally met and interviewed 700 and some in their homes or the nursing homes, or sometimes sitting in a restaurant talking with them. And there are hundreds more who are still alive. They are 83 to 100 years old. And as you can imagine, there are still plenty of those people available.
Now, you're a retired teacher, and I know many people work their whole working career looking forward to retirement, when they can fish, they can put their feet up and relax, but not you. This takes a lot of time and energy. And what is it that's really drawn you to put that amount of effort into this?
Well, basically, I didn't see anybody else doing it. It's something that should be done, and I thought the project would be very simple. I didn't realize the enormity of it. There are about 16,000 people who served in the war from Muskegon County.
Wow.
And I've only done about 10% of those. So it's going to keep me going for a long time. I take Sundays off and try to clear my mind, but every Monday I get started again and meet with just one person. Now that person could be a living veteran, and those are very special meetings, but also I'm meeting with plenty of widows and the surviving children of the deceased veterans, and sometimes nephews and nieces and grandchildren.
How's the reception been from the veterans and from their family members?
The reception from the veterans themselves has been approximately 95% positive. Once in a while, a person says he or she would rather not be involved, they'd rather let it go, but that's rare. In fact, some of those people who have initially turned me down have warmed up later, and then I've included them. So it's close to 100% favorable. And from the children and the widows, equally very favorable, because they know this is good for the county, but it's also good for their family, for the people in their family to know what their veteran did during the war. And sometimes it's 4 or 5 or 6 people within the same family.
I know some veterans that have seen combat don't necessarily like to talk about it or haven't talked about it much. And as you broach this topic with them, you're maybe hearing stories that they haven't discussed much before.
Almost universally, they did not talk to their children about these experiences because they wanted their children to grow up normally without nightmares and without fears of their daddy being killed. If they had shared all of those things with the children, it would not have been good. That's the good part. The sad part is some of these children are in their 60s and 70s now, and some of them don't have any idea what their fathers did during the war. So when I meet these men and women, they are very open. It's like turning on a fire hose of information. They tell me everything because I'm a stranger. I'm not one of their children, and I have heard things that have changed my life and only gained more respect for these people who saved the world.
Now, the military back then was a lot less integrated than it is today, both with women in the service and along racial lines. What have you encountered there as to the diversity of the veterans that you've been able to locate?
Well, there are different categories. The black veterans were not only not given respect, but they were humiliated, given very poor treatment during the war, being in a segregated situation. And I have talked with many of them and many of their children, and looking for more, because they deserve equal treatment. They deserve to be remembered and revered by their family. The women are extremely hard to find. They changed their name when they got married. You can see a Chronicle clipping from 68 years ago, and you have no idea what her name is today. Another thing about the women is they don't make any big issue of it. You have probably never seen a woman wearing a World War II veteran cap when they go to a restaurant, where men do this quite a bit. And also, I've stopped hundreds of older men in the stores and on the sidewalks and in restaurants, and I say, "Excuse me, are you a World War II veteran?" And most of them say yes. Once in a while, one says, "No, I was in the Korean War." So then I say, "Well, I did think you looked a little bit young, but I couldn't possibly say that to a woman, could I?" So the
Touchy
women,
subject.
The only women that I have found, and it's probably close to 100 now, have been ones who have been referred to me, or I referred to them. Somebody says, you should talk with this person over at Seminole Shores because she was in the Navy during the war. So it's tough, but it's worth it because these women did important work. They were discriminated against too. There was a general feeling among many people that they shouldn't be in the military. They should be at home taking care of the family. But they were replacing men in the jobs that they were doing so that the men could go into the service and sometimes into combat.
You mentioned when you'll approach someone that's the appropriate age to be World War II veteran in public, and that gets a little bit into my next question, which is how do you locate the veterans in the community? Is it you get most of them through referrals from other people that have heard about the project, or are you seeking them out primarily?
Well, some of them, of course, I just run into. Some of them I already know from people I've known my whole life. But most of them are referrals. I will meet with a family, and very often they will give me names of people they know who are living or deceased, but it would be a person to follow up on. The project has grown out of control, more than any one person could possibly do, but I'm trying to make a big dent in this huge population of men and women and leave something behind for the county.
Tell me a little bit about what you're leaving behind. You've brought some of the photographs that you've collected from the veterans. I imagine asking people for photographs from that many decades ago, some people have kept them and some probably don't have any anymore.
There are excellent photographs, and then there are photographs that are small snapshots. I can work with anything. In fact, I've sometimes used a high school graduation photograph. Or in a few cases, I've actually just taken a picture of the older person and used that. But that's very rare because someone in the family normally would have some kind of photograph. For me, the very best part of this project has turned out to be the ones who lost their lives in the war. In Muskegon County, there were 435 men who were killed. They were killed in all different types of ways, most in combat, but a good portion of them were killed in the United States in training or other types of accidents or disease. And those people are almost totally forgotten. The only people who even know their names are their families and their very closest friends who are now in their 80s and 90s. These people have their names inscribed on the monument at the causeway. It's just a name, there's no other information, and no pictures are available of these people. So I've been able to find that some of these older people I meet actually have the pictures of their brothers, their uncles, and their close friends. So I've been able to collect the actual photographs. These are copies, of course, and out of the 435, already we have about 100 excellent pictures. The same kind of information is printed for them, a complete description of their service and how they lost their life. And there are almost 200 pictures that are chronicle photographs from the newspaper, and those will be used also until we get better pictures. The LST Museum just this week is putting on a permanent display. I've given them 70 pictures to start, and I will keep feeding them more because these 435 people who died at the age of 17 and up, their lives were completely cut off. They had no chance to become well known in the community or have any kind of life at all. So this is a way that they can be remembered, and people who visit the museum can see their pictures and sometimes recognize their own family members.
That's great. I know there's been some local businesses that have highlighted veterans and current service members with pictures up for display. They've only got so much wall space in that kind of setting, and to have a museum like that has the space and the ability to put a permanent display up is helpful. But I think it definitely takes someone like you to get them that information, that collection of photographs to be able to display, and I think that's really commendable.
When I started thinking about this project, I could only name one person who was killed in the war, because a friend of mine's brother was on the USS Arizona when the Japanese attacked. That's the only one I knew. Now I know these people almost as if they're part of my family, and when I hear somebody mention a name, it rings a bell to me. And the most heartwarming thing is when a senior citizen says, I had a really good friend who was killed in the war. And when he mentions the name, sometimes I can just take the picture and show it to him. And that's rewarding, and it's a comfort to the person.
Now tell me a little bit about specifically who is in the scope of this project. A veteran that served during the war, whether they saw combat or not, maybe doesn't matter. Whether they lived in Muskegon County at the time or only moved here later. Is there, what are the limits? Because you've got to put some sort of scope on it.
Oh yes, there has to be a scope to it. Somebody asked me last night if I could do something about his father, who never lived in Muskegon. I said, I really have to stay within Muskegon County, otherwise the project falls apart. It has to be a person who was in the military between December 7 of 1941, that's Pearl Harbor Day, until December 31st of 1946. Well, you might think 46, the war was already over. Everybody who was in the military in the United States up until that day, the last day of 46, is considered a World War II veteran. And there are two reasons for that. First of all, much of the work that they were doing all over the world after the surrender was signed was directly related to after activities, not hostilities, of course, but dealing with prisoners, cleanup, transporting people from here to there. And the other reason is those people were eligible for the GI Bill, which sent many of them to college. That was the cutoff date. If a person joined the military the next day, then they are not part of this. So you have to be within that time period, and the person must have lived in Muskegon County at some time in his or her life. Even if it was a person who was born here and moved away later, or a person who came here later and lived the rest of his life here, that's fine.
That's about all one person organizing this project can handle.
Yes.
Maybe, and then some. Now, if somebody wants to help with this, what could they do? Do you accept donations or anything else?
There are no donations at all, because the veterans already donated their sacrifices. These people especially donated everything, and the people who served our nation back then donated. So there's no money involved at all. What somebody can do for me is to call me and tell me about their particular veteran, their uncle, their aunt, their father who served in the war. And also the best thing that a person can do is call that elderly person first before I call. When I call somebody cold, you call somebody who's 93 years old and you're a stranger.
They don't quite know what you want.
No, they are suspicious. they have had a whole lifetime of telemarketers, and they're very suspicious and cautious. But if their son or their nephew or niece calls them and says, "You're going to get a call today from a man who wants to ask you about your service in the war, and he wants to make sure your picture is donated to the museum," well, then it's a call that is welcome. So that's what people can do. They can clear the way for me so that my call is not a cold call, but it's a welcome call.
Do you have any experience with these veterans that stands out as really being the most memorable in your mind?
There are so many. I could spend hours talking to you because the things they've told me are just amazing. I met a 92-year-old man in Montague who was a Pearl Harbor survivor. That was something I never thought I'd be able to do, to meet somebody who was there at Pearl Harbor. Well, I've met several now. This particular man had a map of the whole Pearl Harbor area. He explained exactly where he was, what was happening, and what he tried to do to save people who were injured. And it was an amazing thing to sit down with a man who was an eyewitness to history, as all of these people were. But that particular event is especially interesting.
It sounds like he remembers it like it was yesterday.
Oh, you wouldn't forget that. When I was saying goodbye and saying thank you for your service, he told me, "You're the first person who's ever asked me about this."
Wow.
There's a man who's 92. He was there at Pearl Harbor. His children, his friends, nobody ever asked him. I was glad that I got to him before it was too late, so that he could have that piece of being able to talk about it. I sometimes feel like I have a curse because quite often after I meet somebody, they die, because I'm meeting people who are in their 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
When I see their obituaries in the paper, I'm just slightly sad because you expect them to pass away. But I'm very happy that I had a chance to meet with them and bring this information out and give them some satisfaction that somebody cares about them. People are asking me if I'm writing a book. I don't know how they get that idea, but they just figure I must be writing a book. Well, it's not the normal kind of book. I'd say it was a virtual book. I write a chapter a day, and then I send the chapter to the family by email. The very day that I meet the veteran or the surviving family, I send the pictures, I send a brief paragraph about the veteran's service and other information. I send it to one person within the family, and I ask that person, if your father doesn't have email, would you make sure that he gets a copy of this? And then would you share this and forward it to everybody else in the family? So I've written hundreds of chapters, but there's no book. The book chapters go to the family only.
Where do you meet with these people mostly? I imagine, well, at their age, you probably have to come to them in most cases.
They have their things at their homes. They have their pictures, their papers, and other materials. And many of them are not able to get around as well as I can. So it just makes sense for me to meet them at their homes. There have been times when I've met people in restaurants and, of course, nursing homes and other facilities where they live. That's their home, so I meet them there. I go to where they are. It just makes sense to do it that way.
How will you know when the project is complete? When you've gotten to everybody?
Well, I won't get to everybody, of course. That's not possible. I've only done 10%, and I've been working over 2.5 years. So I'll have to live to be 120 to finish it. But I can't finish it, of course. So I will consider it done when there are thousands of photographs in the museums, and there's an excellent record of so many of these people. And I don't expect somebody's going to take up after me and continue this, because it's an all-consuming project. But I have some time on my hands, and I'm trying to put it to good use.
And what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they have a veteran to refer, other questions?
The best way is to go by the information on my card, which gives my telephone number, my email address, and also the home address in case they want to mail me a copy of a picture. Some of these veterans' families live all over the country. I've interviewed veterans on the telephone in other states and talked with children. I'm so happy when somebody has email, because it's so easy to communicate, and you don't even have to know where they're located. You can just have them email a photograph to me with the picture or with the information. So email is great.
Makes it really easy in this modern world.
I wouldn't imagine how I could possibly do this without email and without a digital camera.
I'm afraid that's about all the time that we have today. I would like to thank my guest again, Richard Mullally, and good luck with the project. Very commendable.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on. And thank you for joining us, Muskegon in Motion.